Hi, welcome to the Galt's Vaults. I'm your host, Kevin MacLean, Museum Collections Technician here at the Galt Museum and Archives. The point of Galt's Vaults is to share our work practices, processes that are relatively unknown by the community and by the public with respect to how we manage our collections, how we think about our collections, but what are practices and processes without people to execute them. So I'm obviously one of the people that's involved in those practices, but my face in isolation doesn't do justice to the remarkable folks that support us down in the collections department on a day-to-day basis. So this Galt's Vaults is actually a love letter. It's to sing the praises of the folks that we are so grateful for on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So the Galt has been hosting collections volunteers for 25 years now. Our curator, Amy Benoit, is one of the first volunteers that our volunteer program had, as is current archives assistant Bobby Fox down in archives. However, today we have all kinds of future Amy's and future Bobbies. These are young, eager, bright-minded students from the University of Lethbridge who are interns and volunteers. And we're also especially grateful to some equally remarkable people that have been with us for countless years and even decades, in fact. And I want to shout out to people like Lois, to Tom, to Barb, and to Elaine for helping us over all that period of time. So what is this work that these volunteers are actually doing? So when I speak proudly to our achievements and our standards, I'm thinking specifically of the way in which we're able to have a capacity to share objects, connections, and meanings with the public. And we owe that capacity to our volunteers. So about 10 years ago, when we were interviewing our donors, we were having their verbatim words, their verbatim memories inserted as part of our records so that we could share those memories and those words directly with the public, absolutely unfiltered. And it's our volunteers that have been transcribing all of those interviews. And since 2014, we've in fact transcribed 1.5 million words to date, which is an amazing achievement. That's just respect with collections management. And they've done equally a lot of work for our exhibition program and for our curator, Amy. And so I won't pretend to speak on why they do it. I don't know why it is that they have helped us to the extent they have. So instead, I've actually invited a volunteer to be here with us today, and that's Naomi Huber. I'm here to ask her what motivates her to volunteer down in collections. And also because this is a Galt's Vaults, we're very interested to know over the time that she's been down in collections, what objects she's worked on that she's found personally rewarding and fulfilling that she wants to share with the public today. Hi, Naomi.
Hello, Kevin.
I feel like this should be an episode of Between Two Ferns. It's kind of funny. So I want to know first, like when you have all kinds of different opportunities for volunteering your time, be it with other institutions, organizations, but then even within the Galt itself, you elect to be downstairs in collections where there's no windows. Why is it that you choose to do that?
Well, actually, the opportunity presented itself because when I first applied to volunteer at the Galt Museum, I actually ticked off archives and collections as my two areas of interest. And I was told at that time that there were no volunteer positions available. So they put me elsewhere. That was fine. And then a couple of years later, so we're looking at around 2017, I was approached and informed that now there were volunteer positions available in collections, and would I be interested? And I said, yes, I would be. And that's why I ended up in collections. So it was the opportunity presented itself. But I've always been interested in collections because whenever I've gone to a museum and I look at the exhibits and the items in the exhibits, I'm thinking to myself, where did this item come from? What's the story behind it? And what goes on behind these walls? How are these items stored? What all is back there? How did the museum acquire the items? And so volunteering in collections has fed that curiosity. Those questions have been answered.
So it's one thing to want to volunteer in collections and to actually start, but it's another thing to decide that you're getting some reward out of it? Because people can think that the work is going to be all the excitement that they see on TV and in the movies, but then they may realize that it's something else. So why is it once you started with us that week after week for months and then years, you've kept coming back?
Well, firstly, it would be the people. The people, I mean, that's all. Working with nice people is always incentive to keep coming back. And then it's the nature of the work that you've had me do. For a while there, you were having me cleaning items. I'd never even heard of that before, but cleaning those artifacts, that was really, again, it was interesting work because as I was cleaning, I was thinking, I wonder what the person was like who wore this item or who owned this teacup or whatever. And it was interesting work. But the bulk of the work that I do, and you mentioned that earlier, is transcribing interviews. And I have found that to be very interesting because the stories that connect each individual, the donor, to the item that they're collecting is different. And it covers a whole range of topics. So, for example, I've learned about the history of baseball in Lethbridge through an interview that I transcribed. Or the interview will describe the history of a popular business like Crazy Cakes and Lethbridge's love affair with Spud Nuts. Or the focus of the interview will be on an event that the city of Lethbridge has hosted, like the 1975 Winter Games. And that one was kind of interesting because in the course of the interview, the gentleman who had been in charge of organizing the games was talking about the flame, the torch. And he was saying, where it was located at the NMAC Center. And I was thinking, I have driven by the NMAC Center many times and I have not seen anything like that before. So after work, I went and I checked it out. And sure enough, there's the encasement where the flame was on display during the Winter Games. And I would never have known that if I hadn't been transcribing an interview where it was mentioned. So it's interesting material. Oh, and the other thing too is that I was going to mention, not all of the topics are historical. There are also ones that cover relevant social issues that are happening in Lethbridge today or in the past.
So I haven't done a count of how many interviews you've transcribed, but potentially it's dozens now. And so because this is Galt Faults, I'm interested if there are any or there is any one specific object that you've worked on that has somehow resonated with you that you want to share with everyone today.
Yes, there was one in particular, and it was the interview that you had with Mr. Ed Redekop, who was an amateur ham radio operator in the 1960s. And what I found so interesting about this interview was the human element that was attached to it. It was a hobby of his. But it seems to me that there's an innate desire within each of us to connect and communicate with people across the globe. Not just people in our sphere of influence, but across the globe. And today we have the internet. 60 years ago it was ham radio. So the medium is different, but the premise is the same, that desire to connect with other people. And I think what also made this particularly fascinating for me was it was an interview that you had videotaped. So as I was transcribing, I could actually see you and Mr. Redekop in his garage with all of his ham radio equipment, and the garage was full of it. And it was just fascinating to me. He isn't an engineer by trade, but clearly has an engineer's mind because he built his own radio in addition to all of the other equipment that he had. So that was extremely fascinating for me, was that now we have the internet, social media platforms, video platforms. It's so accessible, but 60 years ago it was a hobby of his, and he was still able to do essentially the same thing, which was connect with people from around the world. So, and also the relevance of the item. It's ham radio isn't really relevant anymore. But that's another interesting aspect to the interviews that I transcribe, is seeing what was relevant at one time and is no longer today, really.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm really grateful that you came out. So with that, I guess we're gonna turn it over to Mr. Ed Redekop and to his hand-built shortwave radio. So for Galt's Vaults, I'm Kevin MacLean. Thank you very much. Thank you, Naomi.
When we moved here, bought this house, I had a family to look after. I had a job during the day, and it was too much. I spent too much time on the air, on the radio. I'd be up sometimes, not very rarely, but up to 4 in the morning, sometimes talking to Australians and New Zealanders. Well, as a working stiff, pardon my terminology, a working man, I had a family to look after. They needed attention. I couldn't simply take the time and be on the air all the time with my hobby. And when we moved here, my wife says, "No, you're not going to go back on again." I had a tower I was going to set up, and she says, "No, you got a family to look after." And I says, "Yes, you are correct. I shall give it up." And that's what I did 55 years ago. I've enjoyed it a lot, and hopefully someone else can see some history or past history of amateur radio and the transmitters that were built by the people that used it. A lot of people that were not capable of building their own purchased commercial equipment, which is fine and it was legal, but amateur radio was meant to be just that, for amateurs building their own and enjoying it. Well, I thought perhaps that someone would appreciate seeing something someone built himself and used and communicated worldwide, a transmitter. Today, it's changed, I think, tremendously, and probably not nearly as many amateur operators as there used to be because of the internet. See, I think that's killed a lot. Because you can talk to anybody by Skype in the world. You don't need a transmitter. So what's the problem?